we can put this behind us. And Julian is overjoyed and so grateful to the Australian people, to the members of Parliament, and to the government and also the opposition who came together to voice the need for his release. Thank you, and I don't know who.
It is absolutely wonderful to be here back in Australian Parliament with the great news that Julian is home and free and back home and reunited with his family. It was so remarkable having walked him into a police station in 2010 to be able to walk him onto a plane in London and escort him home to Australia. It's been 14 years of legal battles, 14 years of legal battles that he should never have had to fight. And to have him home in Australia is really a testament not just to the legal work that we've been doing, and I want to credit the remarkable lawyers that I've been working with, including my US co-counsel Barry Pollock, but our legal teams in the UK and Europe and around the world who have contributed to this outcome. But we really wouldn't be here without the support of the people that you see standing with us here today, the members of Parliament who came together to support Julian and to do advocacy for him here in Parliament. When I first started coming down here to Parliament in 2010 and 2011 and walked the halls, it was Scott Ludlam from the Greens who led that initiative, and we would speak to an empty room. After a decade of advocacy, bringing together people from across the political divide, the work that's been done here in Parliament by this group of friends has really changed things for Julian. The parliamentary resolution that was passed through this Parliament, with 2/3 of the support, government and the crossbench, was all the difference in terms of our advocacy internationally and in changing the political position in the United States and firming up our government's position. I want to thank our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, for the principled leadership that he showed as Leader of the Opposition in saying enough is enough, in his keeping his word as Prime Minister and raising it at the highest levels. Without that support, we wouldn't be where we are today. But that came from the Australian public demanding it, and it came from this group of members of Parliament who put it on the agenda and continued to put it on the agenda until it became the Australian government's position. And so I really want to thank everyone here today for their remarkable contribution. We wouldn't be here without the global movement of people that came together to support Julian and in support of free speech, and that's what made the difference. We've just negotiated the return of an Australian citizen from the most powerful country in the world who were prosecuting him for doing journalism. He faced 175 years in prison for publishing evidence of war crimes, human rights violations and corruption, serious wrongdoing by the United States. And that is the basis upon which he was in prison for 5.5 years in a high security prison, and the basis for his plea that we've seen take place in the last few days. I think it's a remarkable testament to the Australian people that they came together to support this, to the Australian government and to Australian diplomacy that we were able to negotiate this outcome. It was a long and complex negotiation with the United States, but it wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Australian government and the members of the Australian Parliament who supported us along the way. So it is a very happy day to be here. I am delighted that Julian's home. I'm delighted he can be here with his family. And I think it's important that everybody continues to rally around the free speech issues that are so important in this case and continue to demand better free speech protections for journalists here in Australia and in the US and for whistleblowers. And with that, I want to make sure that we recognise David McBride, who is in prison here in Australia for having revealed information about war crimes in Afghanistan. It is unacceptable he's in prison, and I cannot stand here today to talk about free speech without mentioning him. And I know that Julian will be happy that we have. So thank you very much.
It's really good to be back. Today we're celebrating. We don't get many celebrations in this kind of work. There weren't many of us to begin with, but it's just incredible to be standing here with so many of my former colleagues. You will see that this is one of those rare issues that unites people across the political spectrum. You can tell that just from the people assembled here this morning. I want to pay credit to the parliamentary friends of Julian Assange for bringing him home. They brought him home. Also, because they're here, to the incredible, sharp legal representation that Julian has had through this long campaign. And I do want to acknowledge the Albanese government. It's an example of a government leading from the front. The diplomatic work, some of it behind the scenes, some of it in public, the fact that we were able to unite people from across the political spectrum, it's a real credit. It is also about some of the work that goes on that's maybe a little bit less visible from in here, people who are organising rallies and banner drops in 2011, people who signed petitions. You know, it was a global grassroots movement that gave us the momentum, that gave that impetus to the diplomatic work that's got us over the line once and for all. And ultimately, this is about you. If you're in here with a camera or a press pass, Julian has done this for you. Him and his colleagues knew exactly what they were walking into. They knew the risks that they were taking, and they did it anyway. And they did it in part to protect your right to do your job, to inform us about what government is doing in our name. So we're celebrating. For me, that celebration is tempered by the fact that the United States government, our supposed ally, was willing to torture an Australian citizen and one of your colleagues for 14 years, and that it took a global movement to get him out. So we are celebrating, but I feel as though we also need to have in our minds, forefront in our minds today, what about the other whistleblowers? What about the other journalists? What about the other publishers? This is about all of us collectively. One chapter ends, thank God, and another one begins. Thanks all for being here.
I think it's any questions. No, any questions?
What's Julian going to do now? Is it WikiLeaks 2.0, and will he be soliciting information from Russian hackers and other international figures?
Julian plans to swim in the ocean every day. He plans to sleep in a real bed. He plans to taste real food. And he plans to enjoy his freedom. Julian is the most principled man I know, and he will always defend human rights and speak out against injustice. And he can choose how he does that because he is a free man.
The President of the United States has absolute pardon power. President Biden or any subsequent president absolutely can and, in my mind, should issue a pardon to Julian Assange. Obviously, he's just been released. He's just gotten home. I suspect that will take some time. But I certainly hope and expect that the same kind of support that he received when he was in prison will again gather steam, and this president or future president of the United States will have the wisdom to pardon him.
Just a question for Zoe Daniel, Andrew Wilkie and Josh Wilson. Do you think that this, the phone call last night from Prime Minister Albanese to Julian Assange put the US relationship at risk in any way?
Yeah.
Look, I think the bilateral relationship between Canberra and Washington is as strong as it has ever been, and it is getting stronger on account of the common security challenges we face. However, for some time now, the incarceration of Julian Assange was a thorn in the side of that relationship. It was just niggling away on the margins. That has now been fixed, so I now see reason to be very optimistic about the bilateral relationship. That thorn has been pulled out.
Julian just got back from a 72-hour long flight to freedom, and 5 years of incarceration in a high-security prison, and 7 years before that arbitrarily detained in the Ecuadorian embassy, and a year and a half before that he was under house arrest. He is just savoring freedom for the first time in 14 years. He needs time to rest and to recover, and he's just rediscovering normal life, and he needs space to do that.
Stella, has he had time to speak
Not yet, because we want to do it when we're in the same place. I'm obviously here, and the kids were asleep when he arrived last night. So yeah, it's still hasn't happened yet. But they were very excited when they found out that Daddy was coming home. I had to tell them gradually, so they were very, very excited. They were jumping on the sofa, and I managed to send the video of them reacting and jumping on the sofa to Julian while he was, I think, in Saipan, and he was very, very pleased.
And we better have a last question so we can make that happen. Last question.
Stella. Information that was still in his possession that was unpublished, that was United States related information, or in the possession of the US affiliates. Could you explain to us why they insisted on including that clause, and has any information had to be destroyed as a result of that clause?
You'd have to ask the United States government why they insisted on including that clause. The materials that we're talking about are now more than a decade old. I don't know to what extent any still existed or what possible value they might have. Certainly no national security value. In fact, the United States in court in Saipan yesterday conceded, and the judge found, that there is no evidence that any harm has befallen any individual anywhere in the world as a result of Mr. Assange's publications. That being said, they did insist that he issue an instruction to the editor of WikiLeaks to destroy any materials they might have that were not published, and Julian has complied with that provision and issued that instruction.
The United States Department said overnight again that redactions put others at risk of harm, different to what the judge in Saipan said. Have you got any response to that?
I think the U.S. press releases bear little to no relationship to what actually happened in that courtroom in Saipan.
Julian has a story that the world will want to hear. Is a movie deal, a book deal,
Just got off the plane.
in the works, particularly given the intersection, though, that we have very strict proceeds of crime laws in this country that stop people from profiting, criminals from profiting from such selling their stories. Is anything like that in the works at this point?
Julian literally just got off a plane. I have many stories to tell, and on the plea agreement, I believe, and Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, that Julian isn't allowed to request freedom of information, make freedom of information requests from the U.S. government, but you can, and I encourage you to. Why would they want him not to do that? So please do.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Ben, if an Australian Prime Minister talking to an Australian citizen challenges the relationship with the United States, there's a problem with the relationship. Thanks, everyone, for coming today.
Have a good photo. Oh, I think I want a photo.